head up the trade body that represents the games industry. And I believe you've had a few talks previously at previous events from a couple of people involved in games, esports in particular, which is incredibly exciting. And some of the interesting conversation that happened here, I was thinking about esports events. But anyway, I'm going to crack on. I have a lot of slides that are going to make you feel sick, including this one. This is me, age 5. In 1978, I had a terrible squint and had to wear these glasses. And in 1978, these glasses were not cool. They are now, of course. And I was brought up in Hong Kong. And I was lucky to have a German optician who told my parents, bearing in mind this is 1978, he said, right, I think you should buy her one of these. It's a games console. And it played Pong. Everyone, I hope, knows what Pong is. And get her to play it, covering up her bad eye and just using her good eye. And that is what they did. And actually, it got rid of my squint, but I still have to wear glasses because I've still got a lazy eye. But this was my first foray into games, and I graduated into these wonderful things, Game & Watch, which in typical Nintendo style, this is their early handheld consoles. And for every game, you had to buy a new machine. And then you'd swap them in the playground, but I never wanted to let go of mine. And I still have them displayed in my living room. And they were that lovely kind of 70s brown back and lovely kind of brushed brown aluminium, because everything was brown and orange in the 70s. So I'm a non-binary. I don't describe myself as gamer or non-gamer. I don't like the term gamer. But I have, this is me and my friends in Second Life from about 2006. I've been obsessed with virtual worlds ever since. This is my highly successful farm and my New Year's celebration in 2010. I have been an angry bird, and many people do still describe me as an angry bird. That was me 2 years ago in my Chun-Li for my birthday. I made everyone dress up. Nobody did apart from me. That's me and Mitomo. I don't really get Mitomo. And that's me. I'm currently a very successful campsite manager in Pocket Camp, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. I spend a lot of my time going around talking to different animals, fishing for them, giving them peaches, and doing nice things for them. I discovered also my favorite all-time band, Muse, by playing this game, Gran Turismo, in about, I think this was Gran Turismo 3. And we used to play, my partner and I, my ex and I, most Saturday nights, and we had friends round, and it was because of the music in Gran Turismo that I really loved it. And I am still a fan of Muse. I also then discovered my deep love of Run DMC because of SX Tricky, a snowboarding game from around about the same time too. And of course, I love anything to do with karaoke games. I also discovered Regina in this wonderful Second Life at the peak hype of Second Life in about 2006, I guess, before it still exists, by the way, but a lot of brands went into Second Life, this amazing social virtual world, and recreated experiences. And this was Regina's house, and you could just wander around, sit on a sofa, listen to her album. And I'd never heard of her before, so it was fantastic, loved it. So I've always loved these kind of social virtual worlds, and the job that I'm in now involves a lot of advocacy and a lot of trying to make sure that we, and according to our mission statement, make the UK the best place in the world to make and sell games. I truly believe that games and interactive entertainment just combine so many different creativity, problem solvers, technology, innovation, and it's an astounding sector to work in. And we do a range of different activities. This is just a snapshot of some of the stuff that we do. And a lot of it is to influence policymakers in order to help them create, well, stay out of regulatory needs where possible, and also do things that support our businesses and our business environment. And this, again, is just a snapshot of the range of activities. I'm not going to talk too much about what Ukie does. We have an international trade program. We do a lot in terms of education and skills and diversity, but I'm not going to talk about that today. And we do a lot, like I said, in terms of explaining to politicians. This is from the Westminster Games Day that we had in Westminster. This guy's a former entrepreneur. I love that, former entrepreneur. He's still an entrepreneur, but he's an MP. MP for Dundee West, which is one of our biggest oldest games clusters, if you like, across the UK. And we try and explain that games and the games industry is full of creators and innovative people, and we really are truly very important economically, because obviously politicians really respond to economics, but we're also really, really important culturally. And we do this in a traditional way. We do consultations, we do engagement. That's two MPs in the foreground, Scott Mann from Plymouth, or Cornwall North, I think, and Matt Hancock, who's now our Secretary of State for Culture, playing games, amazing. And that's Daniel Zeitner, MP for Cambridge, in a motion capture studio and in VR, and trying to kind of get his head around what the hell is it he's doing in a suit with these goggles on. And that's Matt Hancock again, giving the opening speech, which is very important as part of the London Games Festival, which is something that we run, which helps to disrupt the kind of cultural perception of games and to really shine a spotlight on the UK. And talking about the festival, so when we launched it, basically the festival is funded by the Mayor of London, and it was, believe it or not, Boris who greenlit it. And we actually, to announce it, recreated Boris in London in Minecraft. And then Microsoft sent us a takedown notice. But nothing disappears from the internet, so you can still find it. But it was really, really fantastic. So we had lobbied the GLA in London to really try and seed fund this festival and this idea around sort of really promoting games and games culture, disrupting the perception of games, but also attracting kind of investors and really highlighting all the young startups and innovative companies that are active in this space. And what we wanted to do is we wanted the government and local government to take games seriously in this way and to seed fund and do what they did with London Fashion Week, but for games. So a couple of years ago, they greenlit something called Games London, which is a year-long plan. The key part of it is the festival, and during that, we do things like we put a giant Monopoly board in Trafalgar Square last year, or 2 years ago rather, for a weekend with giant pieces, and each of the squares talked about the history of the games industry in the UK, because not a lot of people know that the fastest selling entertainment product of all time, Grand Theft Auto, is still made in the UK and in Scotland. And all the Lego games are made there. Sega has headquarters there and studios. So this really took us through the history, because in the UK, we are the birthplace of the games industry. And we do really focus on the cultural program. And this is a live orchestral performance of a game called Dear Esther, which some people call a walking simulator, and I bought the t-shirt that says that. And this was incredible because music is so important as a part of what we do in games and creating the atmosphere and helping people to play the game sometimes. And this year we were very pleased. It's like a bit of a austerity Christmas tree, but it was actually a Christmas tree made out of a game called Line Wobbler that we put in King's Cross Station over Christmas this year to advertise the festival. And it was fantastic seeing people every day just play it. We also do a lot of kind of work to try and explain, like lots of people still don't realize that the games industry is only 40 years old, but that it is really, really strong in the UK. I mentioned some of those big titles. If you ask lots of kids where do you think your favorite games are made, they'll most often say America or Japan. And actually, a lot of them are made in the UK. And we know that government statistics are a bit shit. So we try and help them. We have a thing called gamesmap.uk, which is open, free, available to anyone to go to. And we constantly map where the games industry is, because it's really important that people know it is all over the country. So just some top-line headlines for you. So like I said earlier, we're still the home to the fastest selling entertainment product of all time. No box office kind of figures have beaten Grand Theft Auto. And the last version of Grand Theft Auto 5 was released in 2013, and it still continues because it's an open world. It still continues to attract huge audiences and players and gets to the top of the charts. We have more than 2,000 games businesses right across the UK. We've just about to complete the figures on our consumer market valuation report for 2017, and I can't tell you what it is yet because we have a big event coming up, but it's big, and it's bigger than that 4.3 billion, which I'll show you how that breaks down, which was 2016. And we're the 6th largest consumer market in the world for game. We employ thousands of people. 70% of the companies across the UK were started after 2010, which, no shit, Sherlock was to do with the App Store economy and smartphones, and that ecosystem really pushing the free-to-play business model, which I'll go into. And they are very small companies, and they're not small in terms of government SMEs, which is 500 people. They're small in terms of, less than 50 people. But we are the leading hub in Europe. And we're also the leading hub for VR and AR development and lots of other mixed reality. And we're also helped, the government over the last few years has begun to recognize this, is very, very supportive of games. So they introduced the video games tax relief. So if you make your game in the UK, you get 20% back on your development costs. It's very like the film tax relief. And that incentivizes people to open studios in the UK and give people more jobs. We also have a prototype fund called the UK Games Fund, which is government funding, which gives grants up to 25,000. So the government is becoming very aware of the economic importance of games and wants more of it. Just in terms of who plays. We probably all know these stats, but 1 in 3 people play games regularly across the world. The typical person who plays game in the UK is a 43-year-old woman who enjoys other cultural activities. And it's broadly half-half male-female in terms of the demographic, and the average age is 30-something. Despite what you might read in the Daily Mail. And there are over 2.5 billion people who play games across the world, which is a huge audience. And I think the thing that we've been struggling with, it's been all great in the last 6 years that I've been in this job. And all of a sudden, over the last 6 months, and I'm going to go into some of these big issues, there's been some real challenges because we are a very disruptive sector. Every new technology, every new business model, we have so many different business models depending on what platform, what kind of game, what audience you're trying to reach, and it's impossible to encapsulate them all. But we are disruptive and we're really rattling the gates of legislation in lots of ways. And I think fundamentally across the globe, we're seeing these really huge shifts in power and in politics and some real fundamental problems in society. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that we're just seeing the fallout of what the internet has done to us as humans, which I did a doctorate about the internet in the late 90s, and I'm a utopianist, and I'm slightly disappointed that Facebook seems to have ruined it all for us. So games are economic phenomenon. But where we sit within the creative industries is also really interesting because we are technology, but we are creative. We have storytellers, we have artists, we have musicians, we have audio designers. We also have people who understand physics, who can make that waterfall look really realistic. We have mathematicians who can translate data into features and can tell stories with data. We are tech and we are creative, but we're sort of classified within the creative industries, which altogether is worth £10 million an hour to the economy. And this is where we sit. We get to be in that big bubble within the bigger bubble, IT, software, and games. And nobody knows what to do with us. Where do we sit? They don't know how to count us officially. But suffice to say, we're pretty bloody big. Yet if you sit around the same table with the film industry or the TV sector, you wouldn't necessarily think that we were as big. This is how the consumer spend breaks down. So, as I say, we're just doing this, which will be released in a couple of weeks, for 2017 figures. But you can see this massive cultural halo of games. So people and our fans and people who love games also love buying other shit. So they love merchandise, they love the events and venues is slowly climbing, books and magazines. We saw what Minecraft books did for the publishing industry, toys, merchandise. Suffice to say, most of it is digital now. The old days of having box software are in decline, except for where there's really shit broadband and you can't download the game, so you go to the shop and buy it in a box and then wait a day for your updates to the console. But mobile games has played a really, really significant part in driving revenue. And if we look at how the sort of global games market breaks down across the platforms globally, it is so significant, mobile, and it's going to be 42% of the total market. And if you look where that sort of breaks down in terms of territories, Asia Pacific is just gigantic. Games in China are huge, and it's all free-to-play mobile games, and they're very competitive games. So we do a lot of international trade work trying to bring small companies from the UK to do business deals with Chinese companies, because even if you get a tiny slice of that Chinese market, and even if you're a failure, you still make a shit ton. And they also respect and love our IP more generally across the creative industries. They really, really know that the UK, as an ecosystem of creatives with our music industry, advertising, film production, VFX, games, they know that we've got real kind of hotbed of talent, and they want a little bit of our originality. So there's so much potential there in terms of the international space. And in terms of, I thought I'd put a few more sort of reference to music, because this is one of my favorite people in the games industry. This is Jessica Curry, who is a classical music composer. She has a show at the moment about game music on Classic FM. And she's also a co-founder of a little studio in Brighton who made Dear Esther, and who also made Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which is like The Archers, but sci-fi. It's really beautiful. And she's done a lot to really kind of advocate the serious nature of games in terms of our expertise in composition and music, because we're still not taken seriously in these kinds of cultural spaces. And, you know, case in point, BASCA, who run the Ivor Novello Awards, recently just reinstated a category for game composers in their awards after saying, yeah, there aren't enough game composers in the UK, which was bullshit. And we didn't even know about that category. So Jessica was very, very key and instrumental in lobbying BASCA, and we were in communication with them as well. Because organizations like this that celebrate creativity in all its forms, when it comes to music or anything else, should be recognizing games as a fundamental part of that cultural story. And BAFTA, I work a lot with BAFTA on the BAFTA Games Committee, and we do. You know, BAFTA does really celebrate games. And the Games BAFTA Awards, I bet most people in this room won't necessarily know that there is a BAFTA Games Awards because it's not televised. You know, of course, the film awards are far more important, and the television awards far more important. These are like our Oscars, and these are our international gold standard awards, and these are the guys who won the music award. There's a music category for Last Guardian. And this is a guy, he's a single developer based in London who made this amazing game, and he got audio BAFTA for this incredible game. Do play it. It's only about 3 or 4 hours long, called Virginia. And it has no spoken or no kind of words in it at all. So the story's all done through the audio. And it's an amazing game, and he got a BAFTA for that. So, you know, this kind of brings me to the sort of the fan base and what I love about the games industry, but what we're seeing is presenting some of the challenges, I think, not just to regulators who need something to regulate, but also to policymakers and lawmakers. I think what we share with the music industry very much so is our fan base, and very often it's a very loyal fan base. So fans will come back and buy the next version of GTA time and time again, and these franchises are incredibly successful. But the fans, people forget about the community if they're not familiar with the games industry and the games sector and how we operate. But the fans and the players, so we just call them players, they're not consumers, not audiences necessarily, but players, they are our lifeblood, which is why, we as an industry didn't go out and sue people necessarily for pirated copies, because we didn't want to punish fans. And a lot of games, and one recent one called Player Unknown Battleground, have come out of fans creating their own levels or modding, and that kind of is a homage to the game that they love, and then they become a breakout success game that can monetize in different ways. But the fans and this kind of gathering together of people is not unusual in the games industry. This is a tournament from, I think it's Pac-Man, from the 70s. And there's a lot of boys there, but it's hard to tell. And of course, this is completely kind of expanded into this incredible part of the games industry, which is esports. And it's been around, esports has been something for about 25 years, really huge in South Korea originally, because they had really fast broadband, so they could play multiplayer games really easily. And they had this culture of internet cafes called PC Bangs, where people would go, young people in particular would go and just play against each other. So they're one of the most successful kind of esports nation, but esports is really hitting the UK in a big way. And we've got all the right ingredients in the UK to really capitalize on this bringing together of thousands and thousands of fans. This is the international in 2017. This is Dota 2 competition in America. So it's an incredibly interesting area. And the way that we're now kind of using that fan base, and the fans are actually contributing to the prize pools in some of the big competitions like the international, is by crowdfunding, and they're buying virtual items like Compendium or a battle pass for the game that they love, and that goes into a prize fund. That means that the prize fund for some of these tournaments are bigger than any kind of traditional sports tournament, which is quite incredible. So no wonder brands want to get a little slice of that, because they're seeing the aging demographic of traditional sports and know that the demographic for esports is their key demographic that they need to capture, monetize. And of course, we come together. This is something called RuneFest, which is run by Jagex, based in Cambridge. And this happens all the time, these kind of occasions where you sort of recreate aspects of the game. And RuneScape is the game, and it's been around for years now. And it's a great British success story. And lots of teenage boys in particular kind of grew up with this game, so they're still playing it. But I went to this year, and it was fantastic. It was so, fundamental human instinct to want to be around people who share the same passion as you and share their love of this story world that you engage in. And of course, we know about Minecon and people who create their characters again in real life, and they want to meet each other and just hang around and delight in it. And of course, the way that culture is kind of communicated primarily, and the way that people are sharing their love, if it's not through a physical event that they get together and kind of, hang out together, is through YouTube and Twitch. Video games content is absolutely huge, and I think we're one of the biggest categories on YouTube after music. Well, we are the biggest after music. And of course, Twitch is games live streaming. And these influencers now, the personalities, people who are live streaming, it used to just be Let's Play videos, but people who are live streaming their gameplay, people are giving them, donating money, paying them as they're playing. It's a phenomenal business model, and it's incredibly interesting to see how it's evolving. And quite a few again, personalities are falling foul of some of the consumer protection laws or advertising rules, and nobody knows really how to regulate this space, if indeed it needs regulating. But it's incredibly powerful. But games in themselves and the fan bases, so the fans are watching and enjoying and getting together and watching the content and their favorite players through YouTube and through Twitch, but also clever games are using the attention and the activities and the actions of thousands and thousands of players in games to actually affect real-world things. This is a project Discovery in a massive game called EVE Online, which is basically a space mining game. And all the activity, it's a bit like SETI, which I don't know if you saw this week, has been suffering because of Bitcoin mining, but the spare capacity in humans and machines being used to actually gather data and to analyze data. And another kind of game by quite a small, very small in fact, British company called Sequest Hero is doing the same thing on mobile. This has been around for a while, but more and more we're seeing games do this, where it's actually impacting real-world researchers who are trying to understand Alzheimer's in different ways. But why waste games on serious things? The thing about games is that because we have this unique relationship with our players, with the community, we have a live connection with them. Every single game, as I said, is data-driven and connected to the internet. So we know what players are doing all the time. We have huge community management teams usually with the bigger games who are talking to the community, who are co-creating with the community, but that means there's a very big difference to when you actually release something and make it live, and that's just the beginning of the story. So there's no such thing anymore really as a kind of release date and that's it, we can move on to the next thing. When you release a game, usually in the bigger ones, you have to care about what the community is saying, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And everyone is chasing that golden egg in how to make money, how to monetize this fan attention, these communities, players. How do we continue to, as technology and graphics quality and the costs of making games go up in many cases, how do we pay for that? It's a real challenge, and this is where I think we're schizophrenic as a society. So I find the best way to describe a particular business model that has, I think, shaken the gates a little bit is using the medium of South Park, and this was from the cartoon, this was from South Park when they tried to do the explanation of a free-to-play game, and the kids were going to make a free-to-play game. And essentially free-to-play is a model that particularly politicians and the media just don't get. They don't understand how a game like Candy Crush has so many millions of players across the world that how come only less than 5% actually pay anything and you're still making all this money? But that's because the 5% or 3% are paying quite a lot of money. But it has come under attack, the free-to-play model, because in the past you used to pay for a game, you used to enjoy it. This was a typical role-playing game loop. You explore, you collect, you spend what you collect, and you improve. And you do that, and it's called grinding. And then the free-to-play model just put sort of a pay barrier, if you like, not a barrier, but a payment mechanism sometimes. This is supposed to be funny, this is not supposed to be like, this is exactly how it works. And then you end up making lots of money because instead of just grinding and taking your time through the game, you might just be able to buy that extra special power or whatever it might be, and you can accelerate through the game, and that makes the game just barely fun because you're micropaying to have more fun. And it's a really interesting model, and it doesn't quite work like that. How it works is that every single game is just about the data, and it's about then understanding how to monetize because you're reading the data, you're reading player behavior, you're understanding at what point in a game any given player is stopping or giving up or finding it too difficult, and you're dynamically changing the game and creating new features or new events within particularly a mobile game that keeps people coming back and potentially allows people to buy stuff. So lots of free-to-play games will have a seasonal event, so Valentine's Day or Hallmark Day or Moonpig Day, whatever you want to call it, and they'll just have some items that you might be able to buy and spend some money on, real money, to decorate your character. People like doing that. In Second Life, my wardrobe was incredible. I bought a shit ton of wigs, and I had the most amazing wardrobe of dresses that defied gravity. But it's all about how we understand what the players are doing. And the schizophrenia comes in when we start to talk to government about some of these things. Government gets obsessed about funding every single two-letter acronym sector. So whether it be VR, AR, MR, AI. okay? And particularly with artificial intelligence. Games and artificial intelligence has always gone hand in hand. The early AI was trained in games, and now games like GTA are being used by scientists to train autonomous vehicles. And the government, this was the previous Culture Secretary, Karen Bradley, they say things like technologies like AI have the potential to transform how we live, work, travel and learn. It's great that government and industry will be working together to drive growth in the sector to realise all the economic and social benefits for the UK. Then they say, on the other hand, this was from Lord Best last year at the House of Lords, you can be ensnared by addictive online games captured by sophisticated but sinister algorithms that hold the player online. It's not so uncommon for a child to stay up all night playing games and be unable to go to school in the morning. You're also at the risk from predators online using false identities to groom and exploit children. And this is the same AI. Oh, and by the way, nobody ever complained really about kids staying up all night reading. But this is the same technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks. It's all programming and it's all fed by data. And there's this real schizophrenia between our fear of AI and data-driven society and algorithms on the one hand, and our celebration of it. And fundamentally, we just don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to model this. We don't know how to... And these politicians and regulators sometimes don't realize that what games are, with all its data and with all its computing power and with all this kind of systems that we've created, they can model and computer simulate decisions and things that are happening far more effectively sometimes than politicians can. And I think it's quite a worrying time for us. I think we have, a lot of people have their heads in the sand and we just don't know how to navigate, and it affects everything we do as society in terms of our attitude. And we heard about the kind of epidemic of fake news. I used to be a journalist. News has always been fake. I'm very sorry. And, you know, case in point, as we were, you know, starting this morning's session, I was dealing with the press inquiries, of course, from The Sun and Daily Mail, who are asking us for comments about, well, what do you think of this governor in the States who've blamed the awful, awful shooting on games? And it's like, hang on a minute. Games don't kill people. And the press doesn't help our kind of public understanding of the way that we should be treated as part of culture, but also the way that we use data and innovation to really try and design these services and to make money. Another big issue that we've been dealing with is the World Health Organization, who's just come out before Christmas on the 23rd of December and said, without any transparency of process, that they want to classify a gaming disorder as part of their mental health disorders list. And the evidence that they're basing on is highly contested, is extremely marginal, and is not is opposed by a lot of other academics. And I think we're at this real interesting inflection point where, you know, I think we feel like games sometimes can become the sort of low-hanging fruit thing that people like to demonize and point the finger at, because they don't understand how we do things. How do we make all this money? How do we do all this kind of data? How do you deal with 5 trillion rows of data being generated in one mobile game every single day? What does that mean? And it's a question for how we look at, I've realized, see, I know I always go on, so I've run out of time, and I wanted to talk specifically about loot boxes, but I'm going to fast forward because I just want to finish the talk, and then we'll open up to questions. The other, so we had the World Health Organization, we've had these moral panics also over another aspect of a kind of free-to-play model, if you like, which is just in-game buying of items. This is a very, very complex issue, so I'm not even actually about to explain it in detail, but loot boxes. So we have this terrible kind of name for this thing, which we've recalled joy bundles, and basically within a lot of some online games, multiplayer games, they've introduced an in-game purchasing mechanic where you can buy a loot box and it will contain a few items, but you don't know what's in them. Okay, so you're buying something, you don't know what's in there, but you're always going to get something. And it may be a power-up, it may be a weapon that you use, it may be a skin costume, it may be something of value to you if not. There's been a huge moral panic because people are saying, you're using all this data to target people with these things that look like gambling because you don't know what's in it. Basically, games are gambling. No, games are not gambling, and no, we're not doing that. Yes, we do use data to understand what these are, but the very loot boxes are actually over 100 years old because we had trading cards. We had kids who would buy trading cards, whether they be baseball cards or football cards or Pokemon cards or even Kinder Eggs, and they wouldn't know what's in it, but there would be something in it. Yet all of this has now kind of got into this moral panic that actually because it's digital and because it's involving data and evil algorithms, you must be doing something wrong. And this is something that we spend a lot of time trying to contextualize because, oh, what? You mean supermarkets have been doing this kind of thing, which is using your data to design a better experience so that they sell more shit. Supermarkets have been doing this. This whole industry set up for how we use data to personalize and to basically make money. Not everyone does this, but this is nothing unusual. So why pick out games? And I think one of the interesting bits to this is that we as society have not prepared upcoming generations and people to navigate a systems, algorithmic, data-driven world, which is a reality, and it has been for some time, and it's not going to go away. Kids do not get taught how to distinguish what is fake, what is real. They don't get taught foundational computational thinking skills, which helps them to understand algorithms through dance, through magic tricks, through brushing your teeth. They don't get that basic literacy, and they don't get to think about things critically. And I think there's a real problem in the way that our culture is treating technology and innovation, which I think the games industry does represent. And we're only going to get even further into this because virtual reality and these kinds of environments that are here to stay make you cry. They can change the way that you view something. They can actually help you understand deep emotional issues or depression, or they can treat post-traumatic stress disorder. And when you are in a virtual reality environment, which is a natural extension of what we create in games, hence why a lot of game development companies are creating and working in VR actively, it brings a whole different way of viewing the world. And that's going to change the way that kids are actually going to interact with the world, the way that they expect the world to transact with them. The generation of Minecraft players expect to be able to change and modify the world around them. And we are not set up as society to cope with that. Our workplaces are not even set up to cope with how a HoloLens lens and an augmented or mixed reality vision of a engine will help kids, will be kids now's future working environment. But that's the reality. But we need to be able to understand that games and what we do in games is a way of seeing and a critical way to understand and interpret culture. It's not just a medium through which we express the way that we see the world or treat difficult subjects like depression or anxiety or impact real science or just simply make money and provide people with hours of entertainment for 50p. Games and what we do in games and how we make them and how we interact in these systems are a way of seeing. Fundamentally, games are culture, and they are part of the fabric of cultural life, whether people realize it or not. This is one of my, promise I will end, this is one of my favorite quotes from an ad in 1983. The company is, of course, Electronic Arts. I love the dude, I think it's a dude, top right, with the studded glove. And I'll read the quote because I can't read from this screen. They put out this advert when they first started, and they described what they wanted to do. It's a communications medium, it being games, an interactive tool that can bring people's thoughts and feelings closer together, perhaps closer than ever before. We're more entertained by the involvement of our imaginations than by passive viewing and listening. We learn that we are better taught by experience than by memorization, And we learn that the traditional distinctions, the ones that are made between art and entertainment and education, don't always apply. And another great writer who's also a game designer who I really respect, and I recommend you go and read his stuff, he says in his manifesto for a ludic century that like making music, telling stories, and creating images, playing games is part of what it means to be human. Being playful is the engine of innovation and creativity. As we play, we think about thinking, and we learn to act in different ways. And when we're actually creating games, we're deploying all these fundamental skill sets, whether it be human psychology and behavior, or logic and aesthetics and storytelling. We need all of those skill sets. And basically what Zimmerman says, and I totally 100% agree with, but we're not there yet as a society, is that game design and being able to play games and understand game design, and to be able to understand, navigate, modify, and design systems will become more and more inextricably linked with how we learn and work and play and live as engaged world citizens. This is not just the future, this is the present. We don't have this kind of cultural way of seeing the world, which is dominated by algorithms and data. And I'm afraid we will have a lost generation unless we take this seriously. And I do believe that our skill sets and the fourth industrial revolution, which people talk about, are completely enshrined within the games industry. So I will end it there, because I'm probably way over time.